Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. In this birth story, Leslie is going to be sharing her 3 home birth stories, and she's also going to be sharing her postpartum experiences after her first and her second birth. During her birth story, she talks about different things that she's learned in her labors and why it's really important that she learn how to surrender to the birth experience for her baby to finally be born. Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And I'm Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit Podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable, because pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experience as mothers navigating this stage in our lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you have chosen us to support you. Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. This is Birth Story Friday, and we have Leslie here who is going to be sharing her 3 home birth stories. So thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Leslie.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So having a home birth for your first baby is definitely something that I find to be less common. Most folks will give birth in the hospital for their first and then go to transition to a home birth if they do decide to go that route. So can you talk about how you prepared for your first birth and what kind of influenced you to want a home birth over what a lot of folks view to be like the quote unquote safer option of a hospital for their first birth to, just see, can I do it before I go home kind of mentality?
See what to expect.
Yeah. So what made you want a home birth for your first?
It's funny because everybody always says like, wow, you're so brave. But I honestly feel like it was more fear-based decision-making, having my first at home. I had worked sort of in the pregnancy and birth world for a while, and done some doula work for some friends. And I just was not, the area that I lived in didn't have super awesome options for like in-hospital birthing. And then I, had done some research. I thought maybe I'll do a birth center birth with a licensed midwife. And I was in that route. And I was just like, the moment I was doing my childbirth prep class and they were describing how you need to kind of go into this primal state, that's sort of what happens when you're in birth. I was immediately like, yeah, if I have to make any decisions about leaving my home, that's going to prevent me from being able to like lock into what's happening birth-wise, because I'm going to want to take control. I'm going to stay very cognitive. And so surprisingly, I was like, I was nervous to talk to my husband. I was like, are you okay with this? Because I don't think I want to go anywhere. He was like, yeah, whatever. It's your decision, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So yeah, I think it was just not wanting to fall down the line of interventions was kind of, I was avoiding that. And then when I was with my midwife, I really did plan on going to the birth center until closer to the end. And then I switched to home birth probably about halfway through.
Is it pretty easy to find a home birth provider in your area? It's really uncommon for us in our area to be able to find one after you pee on a stick.
Where I lived in Tallahassee, Florida at the time, we had a couple options, and one of them is like the birth center midwife, home birth midwife. She's kind of the most established, and then there's another midwife who's just a home birth midwife. But I would say maybe home birth is not as popular there. But there was no sort of wait list or anything. She was ready for us. The gal who does just home births is a little bit more limited. I see her posting like her availability, due date availability kind of ticking down throughout the year. But my midwife, I've never known her to turn somebody away.
That's awesome. So how was your first pregnancy then, preparing for your birth? And then we can just jump right into your first birth story.
Yeah, my pregnancy was fine. There was, I think, that initial, as you're getting towards the end and you sort of have all these expectations or these hopes or things. And I had done a childbirth class that was inspired by birthing from within, which for me as a therapist was really good because it dealt with sort of the psychology of, get in your head and face your worst fear internally so that you're not facing it for the first time if it does happen, kind of thing. Um, so I just had a lot of that in my head and I just wanted to have my baby by the end. It's at the end, you're like, okay. Um, so I was 39 weeks and 5 days. I had had probably a week and a half of prodromal labor where like every day I'd wake up and be having pretty consistent Braxton Hicks and just having never gone through it before. I was like, yeah, this is it. I'm definitely going to be in labor. And then I wasn't. But then I woke up on the day my daughter was born, kind of like early in the morning, like 2 in the morning. And I was like, oh no, this is labor. Like all of a sudden it clicked. Like, and so I tried to sleep. My first labor is so funny because my midwife had told me, like be prepared with food for us and food for you, just, have things. So when I woke up finally at like 8 o'clock, still with consistent contractions that were, painful, still definitely early labor, I was like, let's go to Chick-fil-A and get a platter of chicken minis. That's the best thing. So I did that and I called my mom.
That is the best thing.
Honestly, that would be so good in labor. Was it Sunday though?
It was a bad decision. I'll tell you about it in a second.
Oh no.
But it was the best decision in my mind. And so I had chicken minis and I made myself a smoothie. And then my mom came and it was just the classic, like a watched pot never boils. And this I learned over all 3 of my labors that my early labor is like, it's so elusive. It's like, it's there full force, it's happening. And then all of a sudden, like in the poof of an eye, it's gone. So, yeah, my mom was there and I felt really pressured because she had come over from a couple hours away to be with me. And I was like, okay, so this thing really has to happen. Otherwise she came here for nothing. But nothing was really happening. It was kind of on again, off again, maybe ramping up like just super slowly. And I had called my midwife. So by this time I had eaten almost the entire platter of chicken minis and nobody besides me and my husband were at my house.
How big of a platter?
Like a big one. Like a lot of them.
I mean, they're pretty much just chicken nuggets with biscuits.
I mean, good biscuits.
They are good, lot of those.
There was a lot of chicken minis, though.
So my midwife said, well, sometimes what can happen is, if you use your breast pump to sort of like, kind of like push things over the edge, it may help. And she was like, do about, I don't know. She gave me some recommendation for time around like the 10-minute mark and then take a break and then come back on. Well, I used the breast pump for approximately a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and my water broke. And from there, I was in active labor. That was like...
So breast pump was successful?
Yes. That was a common theme in my labors. Yeah, the breast pump was super successful. I think because I was already in labor. And then it just sort of like served to push me over the edge. So that, like I said, I woke up at like 2 or 3 in the morning with that early labor. That was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon at that point when she did that. And then from there, it's kind of all a blur. I progressed pretty quickly from there. I was pushing by 7. So we just kind of were moving and shaking for first labor. And I remember I hated the tub. I kept trying to get in the tub, and every time it was like the most miserable experience. So I kept getting out of the tub. And I remember I would be so hot when I was having a contraction, but then be freezing in between contractions. So we basically had this system where I was on my hands and knees on my bed, and the blanket would be on me because I'd be cold in between a contraction. Then one would start up, and I'd just yell, hot! And they'd throw the blankets off me. And then I'd say, cold, when it was done. And they'd throw the blankets back on me.
I love it.
Clear communication is key in labor.
Which is not like me. It was really cool, reflecting back, I'm definitely not the one that's like asked for my needs to be met, but I knew very clearly I need help with this specific
You will
thing.
ask during labor.
Yes. I think I pretty much got stuck though on my hands and knees. That was the position that felt like safest, like I had the most control maybe. And so until my midwife got there, probably about 5 o'clock in the evening, I was basically stuck on my bed on my hands and my knees. And then she asked me to move, I think because she wanted to check me. I couldn't remember if she wanted to check my progress. And all I remember that, during all of this, as the intensity kicked up, I no longer had the chicken minis or the smoothie in my body anymore. Those left.
Oh, no.
So when I got up from the bed, was like, "Oh, I don't feel very good." And so everybody like turned to go find the bucket because that's what I had meant every single time up until then. And I actually passed out because I think of the blood flow from being on my hands and knees for so long and then standing up.
Oh, yeah.
I had low blood pressure pretty much my whole pregnancy, so it wasn't like crazy, but it was unfortunate because I came to in the middle of a contraction, which is never the way you want to wake up at all.
No.
And then from there, my midwife, just being super cautious, was pretty adamant about me laying down and not like getting up and moving around or being on my hands and knees anymore. Um, so yeah, like I said, I started pushing about 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was all my babies had giant heads, but my first one had the biggest. And so I pushed for 2 hours with her. And I was sort of in this awkward position where I wanted to be on my side because I knew I didn't want to be on my back, but I wasn't. She was like, "I really don't want you to get up, Leslie." I'm sure I could have fought it, but I didn't have the fight at that point. I was like, "All right." So I was in this sort of like awkward half side lying, half back lying position, pushing, probably not very effectively because I wasn't very comfortable. And and everything was fine. They kept checking her heart rate every so often. When she had crowned and was like coming out, there was a moment where I think she was too far down in the birth canal. They couldn't get her heart rate. And I do remember the sweet midwife assistant just like gently pushed her like back up into the birth canal to find her heart rate, but didn't explain it to me. So I remember having this cognition, like in that moment, I was like, I'm pretty sure she just pushed that baby back up inside my body. And if I confirm that, if I ask and she says that's what she did, I will kick her in the head. So I like made a conscious decision to not do that, to not ask. And of course she came right back to the same place she had been after she did that, after she found the heart rate. And then I had her at um 8:59 p.m. So less than 24 hours for the first labor.
That's pretty impressive for a first baby. So how was postpartum for you?
Postpartum was fine with her. This was 2019, so pre-COVID. My second one was mid-COVID, so that was much harder. My midwife she basically made you plan out your first 4 weeks of care, like who's going to be in your home helping you with dishes and meals. That was sort of like part of her thing, and she was pretty strict about it. The first time she asked me to do that for my homework, I came back and I was like, "I don't know, yeah, I think my mother-in-law's gonna come." And then probably, I was like sort of halfway about it. And she's like, "No, no, 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 no. Like, who have you called and scheduled to be in your home for these 4 weeks that you have?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, so this is serious homework. I have to actually like make a plan."
I have to actually prepare. Okay.
Yes.
Dang it.
So I had between my mother-in-law and my husband, I think my mom came one more time. I always had somebody there for the first 4 weeks, and we nursing went pretty well. I learned later I have an oversupply and a overactive letdown breastfeeding. So um, my daughter had a lot of spit up, but she was gaining weight and totally fine. So I don't remember a lot about it. I just remember it being really sweet and not so
That's awesome.
That's good.
awful.
Good memories.
I will say my daughter was super sleepy. And so when my midwife came back for the 24-hour visit, she was like, "How's nursing going?" And I was like, "I don't know. She's been sleeping ever since she was born." And she was like, "Wake that baby up!" That was the first time I ever felt like, "Oh my gosh, okay."
Like, what do you mean?
I was like,
Why
"I don't
would I
know.
do that?"
She's been asleep. We're fine. We're just snuggling." And yeah, so that was funny because I had to like actively prick her feet and annoy her to get her to latch in that first 24 hours. But after that, it was painful. It was hard to walk. I don't know. I had a little bit of tearing, I think, just due to my position, and her having a giant head. Um, so it was uncomfortable. I had to have some stitching. That was definitely pretty painful. But all in all, that stuff sort of fades to the background at this point. She turns 5 next month, and
I know, and you got this cute baby to look
You
at.
had your baby like a little bit before me.
What?
My first. May 3rd was me. So you were like April.
Yeah, I was March. Yep.
Oh, March.
Yeah.
So how was your second pregnancy? So were you in the same area, same midwife, or how was your second pregnancy and birth?
Yeah, same midwife. I found out I was pregnant when my daughter was 5 months old, so that was a little bit
Bless you.
hard. It was like shocking, and um I exclusively breastfed all my babies, and I got my cycles back at ridiculously early times. So did not expect to get pregnant that fast, but I did. Did not heed any birth control warnings. Just preventing pregnancy. I was like, surely I'm breastfeeding 100% of my day, so I'll be fine. And I was not fine. Yes, fine, because I love my baby and I'm happy he's here. But that was hard. I think that was like the struggle. And then as it got closer to birth, I was really in my head about things that had happened in my first birth. One of the things that happened was my midwife came, and then she was there for a while, and then she was like, you're not like in transition, you're not about to have a baby, so we're gonna go and we'll come back. And I just remember that being so demoralizing for me. Like I was like, I thought I was almost done. And then she's like leaving. And granted, I hit transition like probably 30 minutes after she walked out the door, and she came right back. Um, but so in my head, I was like, okay, I'm not going to get stuck this time. Um, I'm not going to call her too early. So I was like, just like planning a lot about how I was going to do it differently. It was also the middle of COVID. So I gave birth the second time, May 2020. And so, my husband was also at the time working full time and in his master's program internship. So he was gone 6 days a week. So I think I had a little bit of like, I don't know how this is going to go, because the whole planning for care and um, just getting him to me in time. I had a friend who I pretty much have followed suit behind in life, and her first birth was a lot like mine, and her second birth, she delivered him in the car on the way to the hospital.
Oh gosh.
Because her labor was so fast. And so I was like, maybe I'll have a fast labor like that. What if I have to give birth on my own? Just all the stuff in my head. But yeah, so that was the pregnancy part, was just a lot of what I now can label as anxiety. I don't think I would have told you it was anxiety then, but I was just lots of over planning, I think.
So how was your birth? Did you have a car baby on the way to your home birth?
Fast baby.
My second son was a clean 9 to 5 job. My daughter she was 14 months old, so I was still nursing her. I nursed her for her morning nap, and nursed her, put her in her bed, walked back in my room. And as I was like on my way, I think I was going to the bathroom or something, my water broke. Which I was not expecting. I had done like at a pregnancy center, done like childbirth classes before. So I knew the stats on, I would always tell women, like, you see in the movies that the water breaking is how you know you're in labor, but that's not really how it happens most of the time. But of course, both my second two labors were water breaking first. That's how my labor started. So my water broke at 9 a.m. And then, yeah, like I said, I was really in my head. I had a different doula this time because my doula for my first baby had moved away. And this lady, I actually asked her to do it because she was somebody who worked with me at the pregnancy center. And she's an older lady who had lots of experience with babies and birth. And my first doula was a dear friend of mine, so sweet, so good at her job, but younger than me. And so the dynamic was different. So I specifically asked Karen, my second doula, to be my doula because I was like, you will tell me, you will boss me a little bit. If I'm getting stuck on my hands and knees and not moving, like you're going to tell me, Leslie, you need to get up and move. Even if it's not what I want to hear. So I had that a little bit. But my labor, again, the early labor was so like stop, start. I felt like if I was up and moving around, contractions would come consistently. But if I sat down and rested, they would sort of slow down. So I was having like a complicated relationship with labor again. Luckily, my doula came. She's so sweet. And she had some essential oil concoction. I think it was like clary sage that she put on my inner ankles. And that sort of like got things going again. But so my daughter, when she woke up from her nap, I had a neighbor come get her just to, like, she was so young. I didn't want to be like wrangling her and trying to have a baby. So she went to my neighbor's house, but then by the time it was time for her second nap, I still had no baby and was not really in active labor yet. So again, I nursed her and put her to bed. And that was the like over the hump that I went into
Nipple
transition.
stimulation
Yeah.
works for
It's
you.
like anytime I have a friend that's worried about it, I'm like, listen, I'm not a doctor, but this is what worked for me all 3 times. Um, so yeah, once I nursed her, I went into transition like almost immediately, but still was like so worried. My transition with him was so clear now in my mind because I was like I was crying. My midwife or my doula was like, "Do you want me to call the midwife?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't want her to come and leave again. That was so hard." I'm like sobbing, and she's like, "Well, you need to tell me what to do." And my midwife, same thing. She's like, tell me if I should come or not. And I was like, I don't know. I think really because I didn't want to do it wrong. I felt like I had done it wrong the first time. Like I called her too soon. And so this time I was really worried about that. But finally I was like, yeah, you need to come. And she probably walked in the door at 4:55. Walked in. I was coming from the bathroom to get on my bed to start pushing. Oh, I was on the toilet laboring a little bit, and I started pushing, and my doula came running in. She's like, "Are you pushing that baby?" And I was like, "I think so." And she was like, "Okay, come to the bed." And she's calling my midwife, like, "Get here now. This baby is on its way." And sure enough, from that moment, my midwife was like on the dirt road of my road, and she comes in the door. I'm coming out of the bathroom, and I sort of like squat down to have a big contraction / push, and didn't even make it up on my bed. I just pushed him out, like 3 pushes. He was out on my yoga mat on the floor.
Was your husband there? Did he make it?
He was there. Yes. He was in, it was actually, it was Memorial Day. It was the day that George Floyd died. I'll never forget that. So since it was a holiday, he was kind of there for some extra hours. And I was like, my water just broke. So he came right away.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
thankfully he was there.
Yeah.
So how was this postpartum in comparison to your first? Because now you have another baby, or 14-month-old. I guess that's technically a toddler,
Yes.
and a newborn baby. Did you have the same type of support with it being COVID as well, or not quite the same?
From our family, we had great support. It was really good. But nobody was local. And so, yeah, I think because it was COVID, it was so much harder. And I felt like there were so many more moments where, yeah, my daughter being 14 months old, it was not as though she she wasn't even really at the point where you could stick her in front of a TV because she was still at the age where like TV was not really that alluring to her. So like I felt like I had no options for if the baby really needed me. And my daughter has always had just a strong personality. So there was a lot more struggle. I remember too, I with all three of my kids at some point in my breastfeeding journey, I had what I refer to. I'm not a doctor, and I'm sure doctors would be like, "No, Leslie, that's not a thing." But I refer to it as like pre-mastitis, where I would have like a really painful clogged duct and start having fever symptoms.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but it would never like take hold. Like I would clear the duct, get some good rest, take some oscillococcinum, and I was good to go within 24
Yeah.
hours.
No, that's a thing.
Okay, good. Well, good.
No, so there's two types of mastitis. I'm just going to throw this education in.
Yeah, tell me.
There's types of mastitis that don't actually require antibiotics. I learned this during my research for one of our
Okay.
videos. And so a clogged duct it's just like inflammation, but there can be mastitis with a fever and a clogged duct and like a hard where you have like all of the symptoms, but it goes away within 24 hours. Like your body clears it, where you just take some Tylenol or whatever, like anti-inflammatory particularly. So like an ibuprofen would be better, but you just take some stuff to like help with the fever and it'll go away within 24 hours. And it doesn't, if it persists past 24 hours, that is usually the mastitis that requires antibiotics because it could either be bacterial that actually needs to be treated. Because I had this with my postpartums twice where I had the fever and the chills and I was like, man, I'm on vacation. Like I got to go to a hospital, get antibiotics. And literally like the next day it went away. It was still sore and your milk supply is affected usually. Like you might not notice it a ton, especially if you had oversupplies, but you're also more prone to it if you have oversupplies of getting this, because I also get oversupplies. And so I was like, I definitely have mastitis. And then it went away and I was like, what the heck was that? So there's types of mastitis that don't require antibiotics. So you're not crazy. Doctors would agree with you. It is mastitis, just ones you didn't need to get antibiotics for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because I have had that all 3 times, and I think this time in particular, it was like, if you have a fever, you certainly can't ask for in the middle of COVID, you can't ask somebody to come over and help you with your toddler. Um, so that was really hard. I think it took me a long time. Again, I'm a therapist, and it is embarrassing how long it took me to identify that, like, oh, I think I had postpartum depression. Um, but I did, I think just for the sheer fact of being pretty isolated, having 2 really young children and feeling like you just couldn't ask for help. There was no option for that, especially when like, when you really need it, when you're sick. That's the time nobody wanted to come into your house in 2020.
I would wonder what the postpartum anxiety and depression rates were for 2020 in comparison to like other years. Because I had my son in 2020 as well, and I definitely had a lot of postpartum anxiety that was essentially postpartum OCD at a certain point that I didn't have with my others. And so I wonder if part of it was related to kind of the isolation of COVID as well.
2020, 2021 were like blurs. I'm sure that there are statistics of postpartum depression, but then it's also, like you said, like if you are like in the throes of it, it's hard to identify it in yourself. And especially your husband was probably still gone for 6 days of those weeks for his school. So he wasn't there to be able to be like, hey, something seems off with you. Maybe you need to get help, because that's usually the people who are like, I feel like something's off and you need some assistance, or like to go see somebody.
Yeah, and I tend towards, like, over-functioning anyway, so it was just like, what else am I gonna like, what help is there to have? I just gotta power through. Like, I have 2 kids that need me to show up. I was tandem nursing them, like, there were days where, like and some people love tandem nursing, some people are all about it. I am not about nursing toddlers, like, there is a very distinct age that happens when I am like, "I love you, and this needs to end." So, with my daughter, unfortunately, I didn't know I didn't feel like I could wean her while I was still nursing the baby, so she nursed for 2.5 years, which was way too long for either one of us. We didn't do well with that. But I remember there being these times where the baby would only nurse to sleep for a season, and so I would tandem nurse, and then the baby would fall asleep, and then I would go to try to put, the baby in the bed, like, so I'd end the nursing session, and my daughter would just scream bloody murder and wake up the baby. Just nurse to sleep.
No.
And it was just like, I felt so trapped. There's just conflicting needs and all these things where I was like, "I don't know how to do this." I remember calling my neighbor one time, the one that my daughter went to stay at while I was in labor, and I was like, "I know life is crazy right now, but can you just come over for 5 minutes?" I was, like, in tears. "Can you just come over for 5 minutes and occupy Leona so that I can nurse Toby to sleep? Because I have been trying this for an hour and a half now, and we're all about to go insane." So, yeah, it was super hard.
That's so hard. I don't wish tandem nursing on anybody, because it is so hard. Because again, like you probably, it's hard to say no to them because you don't want to end that journey before they're ready. But I don't know, maybe you had the same feeling when I would nurse my toddler at the time. So she was like almost 2.5. We nursed until she was 3. And it was a hard 8 months, or
Did you
however
have,
many
like,
months
the
it was.
dread? The, like,
Yes.
yeah, like,
Like
I'm gonna
like spiders crawling on me, like dread. Like there were times that she would be nursing that I would just be sitting there sobbing uncontrollably, but I was like, I can't end it for her. Like I don't want this to be like the end of our journey. It was like really hard. Oh man, I didn't realize how hard it was until now. Oh, ooh, sorry guys.
I had a lot of fear about it because, like I said, I got pregnant when she was 5 months old, and I had heard, like, "Oh, pregnancy can dry up your supply," and so I was, like, so fearful that I was gonna have to stop nursing, and so I think there was probably a lot of that guilt there because I did have, I don't that's when I had the nursing aversion, was when I was pregnant at night. I would nurse her at night, and I would feel like I wanted to throw her across the room. Like, I was I didn't know it was a thing, but I was like, "I cannot stand what is happening right now." And, the aversion went away when I had after I delivered the baby, but it was, yeah, that at night or, anytime I knew I was gonna have to end the nursing session, would get all this anxiety because she could communicate now, the baby couldn't. He was like, "Whatever, I'll take whatever you'll give me, mom." He's so laid back even now. But she was like, yeah, so much like so many emotions coming at me every time it was time to be done nursing. And we had this elaborate routine, these songs that we would sing, and I would count down. This kid could count down from 10 when she was like 18 months old because we did it every time when she was done nursing. So yeah, that was a really challenging time. I think I probably have some work I need to do even still, like, therapeutically on, like, what that did for me as a mother. Because I think
Yeah. Apparently also so do I, as I just cried telling a story.
So, how was your third pregnancy? Hopefully, you were more than 5 months when you conceived this one, but
Probably
no,
not though, if you're
just
3
never
under
mind.
3.
Just
I
kidding. Just
was
kidding.
I did better. It was my son's first birthday when I looked
Okay,
at
okay.
I looked at my husband, I'm like, maybe we can start thinking about having a third someday. Like we were sort of, it was his first birthday, so it was May 2021. The world was sort of like starting to move a little bit again. And we were doing okay. I I would wean my daughter in July of that year. But yeah, so in his at his first birthday, I looked at my husband and said that, and a week later, I was recording a podcast interview for my podcast, and I just like she said something in the interview, and I was like, I had a weird cycle this month. Hmm. And I was just like, it just caught me off guard. I asked my husband, and he was out of the house, and I was like, "Will you just swing by the store and grab a pregnancy test, please?" Like, I think my hormones are messed up. I just need to confirm that I'm not pregnant so then I can really start working on my hormones so that my cycles aren't weird anymore. And then, yeah, I was pregnant
Yeah,
and
well, that would be
He
why.
just
cried.
took a breath in your direction, and there we go.
Yeah, that was the least joyful I've been about being pregnant. Out of all 3 times, that was the one I was just like, it felt like a weight in my stomach. I don't know if it was because it was on accident, like, I had some sort of, like, mindset that, like, I had done something wrong, but or that I was being like, stupid or unwise because I was like, "What do I look like having 3 children under 3?" You know, like, it just was like, oh, it was so hard. Um, and I don't think I really got on board with it until he was born.
It's hard when it was like unexpected.
Yes.
It's not like it's not wanted, just unexpected.
And then it was the 3rd time, so it was probably the last one. I think I felt a little bit robbed of that, like, ability to plan for it or see it coming or do it on my own terms because I was like, well, my husband is already on the fence about the 3rd, so I was pretty sure we weren't gonna get past 3 when we were,
You never know.
at 3. You never know. We have not taken any permanent measures, so who knows? Maybe I'll be back on here and
I
no.
know.
That's what my husband says. He's like, we're done with 3. No steps have been taken, though.
So your pregnancy was a little bit more challenging mentally, like with the 3rd baby. How was your pregnancy overall? And then we'll get into your 3rd birth story.
Um, the pregnancy was great. This is where you guys come in because I,
Yay.
at this point, was just done. I had done a little bit of like pelvic floor physical therapy after my first. And then every time I got pregnant after that, I was like, bump this, I'll deal with it later. So yeah, my 3rd pregnancy, he hung so far outside of my body, like I looked like I was a million pounds more than I was because my midwife would regularly be like, "Leslie, put your belly back in your body. Like, put it back in." Because I was just like hanging forward. Other than that, everything was fine. We didn't find out if it was a boy or girl. So I had significantly less like ultrasounds and all of that with him. And I was actually convinced it was twins my entire pregnancy. But because I would feel him in, like, very different parts of my body, like, I had never had that experience before. He would stretch out so long, um, but I didn't wanna know if it was twins. I was hoping if it was twins, it was just gonna be surprise twins. Because in Florida, you can't have a home birth with twins, or licensed midwives can't attend home births with twins. So I was like, I would just keep my mouth shut at every scan. Every time there was a weird heartbeat thing that they were like, "Oh, that was weird." Um, I would just be like, "I'm not saying a word. There might be 2 babies in here. I don't know, but I'm not telling anybody." But it wasn't. I did get COVID at like 32 weeks pregnant. And that was another like, really tricky thing because again, you can't ask for help. Luckily my husband also got COVID, but super mild. He was so annoying. He got like a headache for 24 hours and I was like almost hospitalized. So the fact that his was more mild was nice because he was able to, come and help me with the kids, but still they were at the age where it was like, we need mommy for bedtime. And I was like, okay. So I'm like, hoisting myself out of bed, barely alive, like trying to get them into bed and then also coughing and, being my third pregnancy in less than 3 years, I was like always peeing all over myself. Um, so yeah, that was rough. I ended up getting some treatment, thankfully, um, that helped me get better pretty quickly. But yeah, so so my first baby was 39 and 5. My second was 39 and 3. And so by 38 weeks with my last pregnancy, I was very done. And my husband at the time was working at a prison about 30 minutes away. So getting a hold of him was really challenging. You can't take your phone into a prison. And so I had to call like his boss to get, and then she would have to go find him somewhere on the prison compound and tell him, and then he would come. So again, I was fearful of faster labor. I just wasn't sure what to expect, and so I by 38 weeks I was getting antsy, and I remembered I was no longer nursing at this time. I had weaned both the other two, and I was just again in my head like, what if my body doesn't know how to do labor without nipple stimulation? Like, I don't know. I That's the only way I've ever gone into labor. I don't know. And so I sort of made up in my mind that I was going to just try the breast pump that Friday. So I was like 38 and 5. 38 and 5. I was like, if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, that's okay. I will like let go and be like, okay, I'm not ready to have a baby yet. Maybe I'll try again in a few days. So that Friday afternoon, I put the kids to bed for their naps. And then I got on the breast pump and this time I did do the 10 minutes on one side. And then I got up to unload the dishwasher and my water broke. Um, So, so I
I
called
feel
my
like I should have saw
husband.
that coming.
Yeah, I know.
So I called my husband, but this was the classic example again of like, this was probably the most intense time where it was like my labor, probably because I wasn't quite ready to be in labor. My body hadn't decided on it. I decided on it. But it was very stop start. I mean, literally I was on my feet from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until much, much later, maybe 8 o'clock in the evening, because I was like, anytime I even thought about sitting down or lying down, my contractions would slow all the way to like 10 minutes apart. And I was just, at this point, I was fearful because my water had broken. So I know there's all kinds of timelines about like infection. And I was worried that, again, I was going to get sent to the hospital. And what have I done? And I kind of put myself in this position. So I was like on my feet, willing this baby to come. And my contractions were strong and consistent, but I was not in that like mind space that you get to, that like primal mind space that you shift down into. I was like in between contractions, joking and laughing with my midwife and her assistant. And she looked at me and was like, she got there at like 8 o'clock in the evening and she looked at me at like 11 and she was like, sometimes you look like a woman who's in labor and you feel like a woman who's in labor, and sometimes you don't. So I really would like to check you if you're okay with that. And I was like, sure. And in the like 3 or 4 hours that she was there, I had dilated none more. Like I was still at 4 centimeters, I think. And that was super demoralizing. I was like so just beat up. And she left. She was like, "You need to rest. You need to lie down." And I was like screaming at her, like, "Woman, if I lay down, these contractions are going to slow down and then it's going to be Tuesday before I have my baby. Like, no way, dude." And so I was resisting it, but she was like, "You need to lie down, you need to rest. We don't know how long this labor is gonna be. And at this point, it's like midnight, and you need to sleep if you can sleep." And I'm like, "Well, I'm still having contractions. What do you mean sleep?" She's like, "Get the sleep you can." So I was in and out of sleep, as you can, but my contractions did slow all the way down to like every 20 minutes, for a while. Um, and then slowly but surely, I got some rest, and slowly but surely, they started ramping up again intensely, very intensely, like quick and fast, like have a baby in the car level intensity. Like, um, luckily I wasn't in the car. I was getting in a car. So, I remember like telling my husband, I'm like, "I think we need to call Layla." So that's my midwife's name. So I called her, and she was like, "Okay, next time you call me, I'll get in the car and I'll come back." And it was literally like not even 20 minutes later. I was like, "Call Layla now. Like, she needs to come." And sure enough, so she left my house probably at like 12:15, and that was like at 1:30 that I called her, and l I was I did a lot of laboring on the toilet with both of my second two, and so I was laboring on the toilet, walking, trying to get back to the bed, um, had the urge to push, and I called my husband in. I was like I just dropped to my hands and my knees on the bathroom floor, and again, just pushed him right out. But we didn't know it was a boy, so I just remember I pushed him. Christian, my husband, caught him, and my midwife's comes running in, like right in the nick of time, and she's like, "Oh, there's a baby." So she's like, turn him," and I'm like, "It's a boy," just like I hadn't even seen him yet because he was kind of delivered behind me, and so she's like helping my husband, untangle him. But I think what had happened with him, especially like having done zero work to like keep my body together, having him just being fully splayed out my whole pregnancy. I think what had happened, he had some like bruising on his face when he came out. And I'm pretty sure that whole time he was just like maybe on like my pubic bone or something. And my body was contracting, trying to get him to move off my pubic bone, but I wouldn't lay down and rest and like trust the process of the like ebb of this is going to slow down. This might even feel like it's stopping, but that rest is productive because it's allowing him the space to get where he needs to get. Yeah. So, yep, delivered him at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I forgot this whole part of the story. So, my first baby was 3:23. My second one was 5:25. And I, of course, put myself into labor on 121 because I didn't want my third baby to mess it all up. I had some really cool numbers going on. And unfortunately, yeah, because I would not lay down and rest, he was not born till 122. He was born at like 2 in the morning. So my midwife had said, she was like, "If he's born at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock, I'll fib on the birth certificate for you." But like by 2:30, I was like, she's like, "Yeah, no."
Yeah, sorry, I can't do that.
Oh, that would have been cool.
So you said that between the three births, you learned like more and more about your laboring pattern, that if you had a fourth, you'd be like an expert in your own birth now. What is it that you learned between the three births?
I think first of all, I learned probably the biggest thing is that just the like interplay between my autonomy, and agency in my own births, and the fact that it's a process that requires a little bit of surrender and a little bit of like willingness to be comfortable with the slowness of it. I think In all 3 births, there was a moment where things were slow, and to me, that was anxiety, I think maybe from having friends who had birthed in the hospital system, or I mean, I don't know exactly what it is, but at some point, the slowdown to me communicated that I was going backwards, that, like, we weren't progressing to a baby anymore, and by the time my midwife made me lay down and, like, sleep in the middle of a labor, which I had never done because it was always the middle of the day, so I could kinda get away with being up and being active. Some, like, active rest, like, I'd sit on a birth ball or something, but by the 3rd one, she's like, "No, no, you you need to straight up go to sleep. You need to stop participating in this activity." And it was that where my body was able to do what it needed to do. So I think that birth was just such a beautiful, like, interplay because I did at first feel a lot of guilt about inducing my own labor because I was like, "You probably shouldn't do this." Like, everybody says you should surrender, you should wait, it'll happen when it happens. But, like, I, for various reasons, really wanted to have a baby. That weekend, it felt safe because I knew my husband would be home for a couple days. It felt safe because I could have some control over it. Um, but at some point, I still needed to step back and relax and trust the, like, slow down and trust that I could have some agency, but I couldn't have all the agency, and I couldn't force it to go the way that I wanted it to go.
Surrender, I think, is a huge part of birth, especially if you're wanting a low intervention unmedicated birth, like being able to surrender to what the reality of your birth is, I think, one of the most important things for labor to progress in the way that it needs to. And as much as I kind of hate the whole, like, just trust the process type of thing, like, there is a bit of just trust that needs to happen.
I think
Even in the moment, if I'm like,
it's trust, but also like letting go of those expectations that you're wanting and just like letting whatever's happening just happen
absolutely.
and trust that it's going to go how we want it to go. Because our bodies they know what they're doing.
Well, I was gonna say birth is so cool too because you're not alone in it. It's not as though you're surrendering to something and nobody else has eyes on this thing. Like, at least in my experience, I had my husband there, and I had midwives there, and I had doula there, and I had people that were also it's like you're surrendering to the fact that, like, okay, what I need to do here is not be in my own head, but I'm not nobody else like, there are other people here who absolutely know what's happening or, like, absolutely are on their game. Like, my midwife,
Yeah.
I'm sure she didn't even go back to sleep when she went home. I'm sure she knew, like, "I'm gonna be back in that house in just a couple hours. Because at this point, she'd walked with me through, 2.5 births. So, that was kind of my
2.5.
pattern. I'd had, like, slow, slow, slow early labors, and then as soon as I got over that hump, it was like I think the only reason she really was super present when I pushed out my first baby was because I pushed for so long, but I think I remember she walked in the door as I was already starting to push with my first 2. So all 3 of them, it was like this slow, like, meandering early labor, and then transition was, like, pretty quick, and then I was pushing.
well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast to share your 3 birth stories. We really appreciate you. It's always really cool hearing, like, a bunch of home birth stories too, especially that you chose a home birth for your first is definitely way more uncommon. And thank you also for sharing about your postpartum experiences as well, especially your second postpartum experience, which sounds like it was definitely more challenging than the first. We didn't hear about the third, but your stories are on the longer side of the episode. So
But I think it's helpful for other peoples to hear the postpartum experiences, especially when it's
yeah,
not like
absolutely.
baby came out and it was just perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's not everybody.
I think the postpartum is when a lot of us probably feel the most alone in our experiences. Like everything's very heavy on pregnancy, birth, and then like your midwife had to force you to plan for postpartum. And so I think most of us just kind of pretend it's not going to happen until we're in the trenches of it. And then we're like, oh, shit. So thank you so much for coming on and being very vulnerable about your second postpartum experience as well. I know it's really going to help folks who are trying to figure out how to not tandem feed and dealing with a lot of the frustrations that may be coming with that. So thank you again for coming on to the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All of my clients that have used Jean and Roxanne's programming have raved about it. They have, people that haven't ever lifted or done anything before, they really feel like it made their pregnancy easier. If they were having SPD pain and they started working out later on, they started to see changes in that and it started to alleviate it. It just all goes very, very hand in hand. And I'm thankful as a doula that I have the programming to be able to share with my clients and just really set them up for success because, working out in pregnancy, like we are strong, we are capable. Like even when we feel completely nauseous and sick, like getting to the gym, working on ourselves, working for our babies, just really helps push us and lets us have a better pregnancy. The programming's been great and I'm super thankful that I can share it with my clients and that they're able to have better pregnancies because of it.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's birth story. If you want to check out more episodes, be sure to tune in every Wednesday for our educational podcast episodes and every Friday for the next birth story. If you want to learn more from us throughout your pregnancy, you can join our postpartum fitness programs and childbirth education course so that we can support you throughout your entire pregnancy journey. If you're postpartum and you want to learn from us, you can join our postpartum education course where we explain what you can expect in the postpartum and also newborn care. This course also includes infant massage and infant CPR and choking. If you're postpartum, you can also join our postpartum fitness courses, but before that, you can join our free early postpartum course, which we'll link down below, which is a recovery course that you can do from birth until about 4 to 6 weeks postpartum.
If you're a professional and you want to learn more from us and earn CEUs, you can join our professional courses. We have a birth workers course as well as a prenatal postpartum fitness trainer course. And you can use code STORY10 to get 10% off of any of our offerings, just as a thank you for listening to this entire episode.